Some films get shoved into production faster than you can say, franchise! But some linger for years, or even for decades. Now it's time to peek into limbo and take a look at the movies that wandered the caverns of development hell. Number 10. Warner Brothers got ahead with themselves, it seemed, as no sooner had Batman and Robin been completed, they were already planning the next one in the series, Batman Triumphant. This time the rogues gallery of Batman villains were to be taken up with either shock jock DJ Howard Stern or Nicolas Cage, planned to be cast as the Scarecrow. This also set up a plan for Jack Nicholson to reappear briefly as the Joker, due to an hallucination in Batman's mind brought on by the Scarecrow's fear toxin. Harley Quinn was also set to appear, but rewritten as the Joker's daughter, looking to get revenge for the Clown Prince of Crime's death in the first film. However, after Batman and Robin was swamped with negative reviews upon its release, the Batman franchise officially hit rock bottom. This resulted in not only Batman Triumphant being cancelled, but a number of other superhero movies as well, including Superman Lives. More on that one later. Considering that Batman and Robin practically killed the comic book movie genre stone dead for a number of years, it's probably just as well that Batman Triumphant never saw the light of day. Hence its low position at the number 10 spot. Number 9. You would have thought that a movie adaptation of the popular first-person shooter would be a no-brainer, considering that it's pretty bloody cinematic already. In 2008, a big screen adaptation was coming along nicely, with Lord of the Rings helmer Peter Jackson set up as producer, with Neil Blomkamp taking up directing duties. However, this dream project soon became a nightmare due to constant interference from Microsoft, the owners of Halo. Eventually, Jackson and Blomkamp said, "Sod this," and instead went on to make the fantastic District 9 together. As a result of this, Halo comes in rather low in our top 10. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel, as Steven Spielberg will now be producing a Halo television series. Number 8. After the X-Men cinematic trilogy wrapped up in 2006, 20th Century Fox's plan was to follow up with a series of prequels focusing on individual characters. X-Men Origins Wolverine was the first of these, and Magneto was intended to be next in line. David S. Goyer, the writer of the new Superman film, Man of Steel, was set to direct, with Sir Ian McKellen reprising his role as Magneto, whose origin would be told through flashbacks to the Second World War, where Magneto was imprisoned in the same concentration camp we saw him at the beginning of the very first X-Men movie. He meets Charles Xavier for the very first time as a young soldier during the liberation of the camp, and the two of them quickly become friends. However, Magneto then begins to hunt down the Nazi war criminals who tortured him, which leads to him and Xavier going their own separate ways. The idea was that Ian McKellen would play Magneto both as he is now and also as a younger man in the flashbacks. This would be made possible by using the same computer-generated facelift that was applied to him and Patrick Stewart during the first scene of X-Men The Last Stand. However, the plan soon changed when X-Men Origins Wolverine didn't perform as well as expected at the box office. This, along with a Hollywood writer's strike, delayed the movie even further until eventually the storyline was simply absorbed into X-Men First Class, hence its low position here at number 8. However, despite this, a sequel to X-Men Origins Wolverine, entitled The Wolverine, has been made, and Ian McKellen will play the part of Magneto again, along with his younger counterpart from X-Men First Class, Michael Fassbender, in the next X-Men movie, entitled Days of Future Past. Number 7. This 1990 prequel to the successful comedy Who Framed Roger Rabbit was going to show Roger enlisting the army during the Second World War, alongside other famous cartoon characters from the golden age of American animation. The idea is that, seeing as toons can't be killed in any shape, way or form, that they make perfect soldiers. Along the way, Roger meets and romances his big-boobed future wife Jessica Rabbit, who has been kidnapped and forced to make pro-Nazi Germany broadcasts. Roger, along with his Toon Platoon, of course end up rescuing her and saving the day, which leads on to Roger getting married to Jessica, becoming a big Hollywood star, and even becoming tearfully reunited with his missing mother and father, Bugs Bunny. Despite a full script and a number of songs being written, Steven Spielberg, who oversaw the first movie, was working on a rather more serious World War II movie at the time, and decided that he didn't really want to use Nazis as comedy villains ever again. As a result of this, Roger Rabbit 2 disappeared into a rabbit hole that it has never emerged from again. Number 6. Although we did get a Resident Evil movie, in fact we got several of them, the job of writing and directing the survival horror adaptation originally fell to Mr. George A. Romero himself, the man who practically invented the zombie movie genre. Romero already had an association with the game's creators, Capcom, from when he had directed a Japanese commercial for the Resident Evil 2 video game. Romero's original screenplay was closely based on the very first Resident Evil game, and featured such well-known characters as Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, who were involved in a romantic relationship. There was also the likes of Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, and Albert Wesker. The majority of the film would also be set inside the Spencer Mansion, as the first game was. Unusually, Capcom actually rejected Romero's original script, sticking too closely to the plot of the game, and wanted something more closer to an action movie. Eventually, Romero left the project and Paul Anderson stepped in to give us the Resident Evil movies that we see today. Unfortunately. Number 5. Yep, a number of potential Spidey movies in one here, folks. First up, there was James Cameron's infamous portrayal of Spidey that depicted everyone's favourite wall crawler swearing like a trooper and even having a sex scene with Mary Jane Watson on top of the Brooklyn Bridge while still wearing his costume. Cameron's vision was an origin story which had two characters similar to Electro and Sandman as its villains, and there would be a final battle that took place on the top of the World Trade Center. Another earlier version had Dr. Octopus as the villain, with Cameron wanting to cast his old mate Arnold Schwarzenegger in the role. Cameron eventually walked away from the project, as various movie studios then spent nearly a decade suing each other over who had the legal right to make a Spider-Man movie. However, a number of aspects from Cameron's original screenplay actually made it into the finished film that was eventually made by Sam Raimi. These aspects included a villain tempting Spider-Man to join forces with him, as well as the introduction of organic web shooters, rather than the mechanical ones used in the comics. After a trilogy of successful Spider-Man films, it looked like a fourth, fifth, and even a sixth movie was going to be made, despite the lukewarm critical reception of the third movie. The fourth planned Spider-Man film was to originally feature John Malkovich as the Vulture, terrorising New York alongside his daughter, a brand new villain called the Vulturess. Anne Hathaway was in negotiations to play Felicia Hardy, but the idea was that she would become the Vulturess instead of the Black Cat of the comic books. However, Raimi would later say that Hathaway would have been the Black Cat if Spider-Man 4 had ever been made, and that Spider-Man would have begun a relationship with this fellow costume vigilante after getting dumped by Mary Jane Watson, who would then start dating Michael Morbius, no doubt leading on to a setup for Spider-Man 5. Of course, Hathaway would later go on to play a rather similar character in The Dark Knight Rises. Other rumours for a villain in this second Spider-Man trilogy would be Carnage, as Sam Raimi stated that he wished to redeem himself after the way that Venom was handled in Spider-Man 3. In addition, Dylan Baker's Kirk Connors from the previous films was expected to finally morph into his lizard alter ego. Spider-Man 4 suffered script problems from day one, and run-ins between Raimi and Sony over scheduling led to the director leaving the film in 2010. Raimi was never happy with any version of the script for number 4, and when Sony pushed him to commit to filming by a certain date, he instead chose to walk away, taking Tobey Maguire with him. Rather than try to find a replacement, Sony opted to scrap all of these ideas in favour of a hard reboot of the series, which became The Amazing Spider-Man. Number 4. Whilst other 80s toy and cartoon franchises such as Transformers, G.I. Joe and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have done rather well for themselves at the box office, He-Man has not been so fortunate. A planned reboot of the Masters of the Universe, no doubt wishing to erase the painful memories of the Dolph Lundgren film, have been on and off so many times that even die-hard fans of the franchise have lost all hope. First, John Woo was signed on to direct, then the director of Kung Fu Panda was on board, then the director of G.I. Joe 2. And yet there is still no joy. Warner Brothers originally picked up the rights for the movie, but clashed with Mattel over their different visions of what the movie should be like. Several versions of the screenplay have indicated that Grayskull would be an origin story for both He-Man and Skeletor, along with the origin of the Power Sword. It also looked as if the movie was carefully trying to avoid any of the campness or cheesiness of the 1980s cartoon and subsequent live-action movie. And no comic relief. So it looked like Orko would once again be conspicuous by his absence. Although Columbia Pictures have now secured the rights to make a He-Man movie, there are no directors being attached to the project. I wouldn't hold my breath for this one, quite frankly. Although the 2002 animated series of He-Man is a good source of inspiration. Number 3.
Kill!
Looking set to be the biggest, darkest, goriest, sexiest video game adaptation ever, BioShock the movie was announced to great fanfare in 2008. With Pirates of the Caribbean director Gore Verbinski on board, the movie was due to have a budget of $200 million and contain rated R certificate levels of gore and sex. But then, Watchmen flopped at the box office, giving movie studios cold feet over another 18 certificate movie that would cost them millions to make. The budget was slashed to a mere $80 million. Verbinski said, "Sod this," and walked away from the project. Shortly afterwards, BioShock's main man, Ken Levine, pulled the plug on the whole thing. And no amount of "would you kindly" is likely going to make him change his mind. To be honest, it's not the kind of project that could scale down to a lower age rating, considering that a good chunk of the game is spent injecting yourself with upgrades and contemplating on whether to end the life of those bloody terrifying little sisters or not. Number 2. Dan Aykroyd has been trying to get Ghostbusters 3 out of development hell since 1989, with the main roadblock being that Bill Murray has no interest whatsoever in reprising his role as Peter Venkman. In fact, when Murray was sent a proposed script for Ghostbusters 3 through the post by Aykroyd, he hated it so much that he put the entire screenplay through a paper shredder and mailed the contents back to Aykroyd. Seemingly to wind up Dan Aykroyd even more, Bill Murray showed up to an awards ceremony in full Ghostbusters gear to accept an award for Zombieland, only remarking, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything by this, it's just all that was left that was clean." Recently, Murray has eased off a little, stating that he would agree to return, just as long as his character was killed off within the first 30 minutes. Aykroyd now reckons that the movie will start shooting without Murray next summer. Okay, whatever you say, Danny. Before we do a countdown of the top 10 so far, let's take a look at a couple of honourable mentions. First up, although a fourth Jurassic Park is due to be released sometime next year, it will be a completely different beast from the one that we almost got in 2006, which would have focused on terrifying mutant dinosaur hybrids that look like the xenomorphs from the Alien movies, only bigger and with more teeth. Unsurprisingly, studio executives decided against permanently traumatising loads of pre-teen cinema goers. Also worthy of an honourable mention is Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman movie, something that Warner Brothers must now be absolutely kicking themselves over that they turned this project down. If things had been different, Joss Whedon might have ended up directing a Justice League movie rather than an Avengers one. Well done there, Warner. Well done. Let's do the top 10. At number 10, Batman Triumphant. At number 9, Halo the movie. At number 8, X-Men Origins Magneto. At number 7, Roger Rabbit 2. At number 6, George A Romero's Resident Evil. At number 5, James Cameron's original Spider-Man movie, along with Spider-Mans 4, 5 and 6. At number 4, Grayskull. At number 3, BioShock. And at number 2, Ghostbusters 3. Number 1. Well, come on, it was bound to be this, wasn't it? We mentioned it at the start of the video, and we're mentioning it again now. And of course, the whole reason why I've made this video in the first place is because the Man of Steel is out. But before Man of Steel and before Superman Returns, we had this attempt to bring Superman back to the big screen, with Nicolas Cage as the Man of Steel himself, along with a script written by Kevin Smith, and dark visionary director Tim Burton signed on to try and work the same magic he did on the first 2 Batman films. In fact, speaking of which, there was rumours that Batman would actually appear in the film at one point, played again by Michael Keaton. This movie, which was based on the death and return of Superman storyline in the comic books, looks set to be a surefire winner, as Superman would face off against villains like Doomsday, Brainiac and Lex Luthor. Photos of Cage wearing the Superman costume for a screen test were released, just showing how far they'd actually got with this project. However, after endless rewrites and a whopping $30 million being spent, Superman Lives was eventually canned. The response to Batman and Robin didn't exactly do it any favours either. A real shame, as it looked a heck of a lot better than the snooze fest that was Superman Returns. Interestingly enough, a Kickstarter project is now on hand to try and raise funds to make a documentary showing the rise and fall of the making of Superman Lives, which should make for an interesting watch if the documentary ever does get made. But Superman Lives could very well be the greatest movie that was never made. Until next time, this is the Big Daddy D, signing off. Goodbye.